morning, everybody. This is Ryan from Performabuilt. It's been a long time since I've done a video, but I figured it's been long enough I get back at it, and Kendrick wanted a video with his build. It is a 1995 Impala SS with LS swap. It's about 650 horse, and he's picked out our level 3, which is a good fit. You know, it's 650 and that heavy of a vehicle. You know, the Impala's, I think, somewhere north of 4,000 pounds. Our one builder, Frank, actually has one. And so the level 2, probably a little too close for comfort with that weight and you know, 50 horsepower. It's just not going to give you the security. That's how far it was off. So another thing I wanted to talk about is, you know, we did a lot of videos, and I actually sit there and I answer your comments and I read them, and I took a lot of things to heart, and I appreciate all your feedback, even the trolls. You know, can't get rid of you guys. But so we're going to be doing Kendrick's level 3 build. I'm going to be talking about, I wasn't going to do a big talk video, but I decided to anyway, because there's a lot of things after watching some of my old ones that I never did cover, and the things actually matter. I'm always talking about details, and I'm going to go over some details I never really talked about. So not only is this video for Kendrick, it's kind of for me and our YouTube too. So nobody likes a YouTuber with an ego that makes the whole video about themselves, so we'll jump right in. And the first thing I like to do is get our harness out the way. Before I do that, considering, you know, our level 3 gets a brand new one, before we actually get into everything, some of them little details I'm talking about that I never did mention before is little things with the case. Not only should, you know, everything be nice and clean and flat sanded, and your shift linkage seal replaced, and your parking pawl inspected, you want to look at a couple things like the third accumulator check ball right in here, right here. That's extremely important to either vacuum check or air check or just replace. It depends on what condition it's in, but if that isn't working properly, your 3/4 is going to burn up almost immediately. It's just going to vent all the fluid up into the case, and you'll have a burned transmission. Another thing, you know, that is really looked over, that I've been paying attention to more often than not, and something I never did talk about that's important, is all the chamfers of the bolt holes on the valve body side. Okay, everybody's always talking about cross leaks and this and that. The biggest way to make sure that your valve body and plate and all that, even the pump, is going to sit flush and have no leaks and just be right is check all your chamfers. The chamfer of the bolt hole is actually what helps torque the components down. It's that space that it needs. So without it, your bolt's just going to run through, and it's probably not going to seat. So, you know, if you do have a bad chamfer, one thing you can do is, I don't know, take a one of your flat punches or some sort of blade or something, and just, you know, make your own chamfer. Aluminum's soft. It doesn't really take much either. It's just a quick thing that you can do to make sure you have the best surface for the valve body that's possible. Another thing is flat sanding it. I have talked about before. You know, these cores are getting old, and everything is built from a core. I don't care what transmission company you go through. So some of these surfaces over time, whether they be laying in the junkyard or just bashed around or taken apart a little rough, you know, you want to flat sand it, because there could be a high spot or any sort of warping that could occur. So this must be flat. The only other thing to look for is check your back of your case. You know, if that's cracked anywhere, even if you do the build to the T, follow all the books, this back, there is no really real textbook symptom for it. It could cause just about any symptom in the book. from low pressure to erratic shifts to anything, to just a big leak. So any leak is a no-go. Transmissions leak internally, but it's not that type of leak. Any external leak is a bad thing. Other than that, I've already done the bushing and the low piston, which is not very... If you're just rebuilding, those seals typically don't go bad. If you're buying a new unit, you know, or rebuilding your new performance unit, you want to replace those seals. But that's another thing that's usually looked over that most people don't cover very well. So anyway, low pistons and bushings, and this is inspected. Third accumulator check ball. It's flat sanded. Chamfers are good. Servo bore is good. Vent tube's good. We're good to go. So we'll start with our wiring harness. And that's simply just to get things out of the way. This is going to be a more relaxed video. I'm not going to move very fast. I want to cover this thoroughly today. For you guys that were whining about my clawfoot hammer that I've been using for 4 years, I finally got a ball peen to make you happy, all you trolls. And, you know, I got to give it to you. It is a little easier to use. So I'm always up for advice. Okay, back to what I was saying about these units getting old. A lot of misconception with this 4L60 is it's not that great of a transmission. Wrong. It is. You have to just understand it can be the same as the 80. The 80 can pull more weight and all, but the junkyard 80 thing's a thing of the past because they're getting old too. You know, maybe back in the day when they were less than 10 years old, sure, you could pull one out, slap it in your ride, and go like 500-700 horsepower. 1,000's a bit of a stretch. You might get lucky. But anymore, these things are getting to be 20 plus years old. It's not the same. It's not going to work no more. So with the 60 and now even with the 80, there's a lot of things to take into account to make these things last. And with both of them, it's really as simple as servicing it. One thing I've noticed in my career is a lot of guys do not service their transmission. They either don't know there's a filter in there or think it lasts forever and just refuse to change it, or it's just laziness and nobody wants to just drop the pan like you should and get in there and do the service. It's a little harder than an engine, I know. And no, there's no auxiliary system that can be, just drop the pan. Trust me. The filter, the most important thing I can actually say in this video ever, or any video, is the 4L60 is a great transmission, along with the 80. And any transmission will last if people would just change the filter instead of just changing the fluid and leaving that clogged up, soppy filter in there. You know, the theory is, and it's not even really a theory, it's a fact, that you are pulling fluid through one hole. And the hole is X size, and it is the same as a 60 or 80. It's the same size. So you're pulling fluid through this hole in the pump, which is probably 3/4 of an inch big. Now that hole is not going to get any bigger, but it can get smaller via filter restriction. And this is a sealed unit. So the unit isn't going to stay clean. It'll stay cleaner than most things, but the gears, the clutches, they're always shedding little bits of debris. And the debris is very, very fine. It's not something you can actually see. That's probably an Amber Alert or weather that we don't have. Ignore all my phones, everything's going crazy. This needs to shut up. Okay, it's shut up. Alright, so back to what I was saying. You're only pulling fluid through a certain hole size, which is about 3/4. In the 80, the 60, it doesn't matter. The higher you go up in gears, especially with the 60, your third clutch pack and your fourth gear use a ton of fluid. Okay, so that hole and that amount of fluid has to be optimum. If it's restricted, these components, your 3/4, your band, they aren't going to get the fluid they need to cool themselves and hold power, and they will slip and burn. It all comes from just changing the filter. So I mark them. I know, change your filter. That's the best way to get your transmission to last. And it boils down to when you should do it, which is if you have a brand new transmission, do it in 1,000 miles or so. If you have one that you're using or past a company's break-in, just follow your owner's manual. That's what we require, your owner's manual. If you don't have that, use your experience. If you're racing, you should be experienced enough to be responsible enough to know when to change it. Okay? You know, it's just taking care of your race car. That's just it's in the Bible right there. That Amber Alert messed me all up. So yeah, servicing your unit. That's the first thing you're going to do. So now for the build. This build is rated for, in our spec, 900 horse in a 3,600 pound vehicle or so. Not full weight, not 3,600. So get that right. It isn't just going to hold 900 in your 4x4 truck. No, we're got to drop that down. There's factors in our builds. We just give you an idea when we say it, and then we go from there. Everything is custom. Everything's accounted for. So, all that being said, we've covered servicing your unit. With our unit, 99% of our units use a deep OEM filter. OEM tends to be the best, okay? And this is out of any 2005, 6 GTO, any heavy truck. It's a big plastic deep filter. And if you ever wanted to cross-reference the number, it's E7401OED from WIT. Any auto parts store is going to have it, but this is the one. This is what I want you guys to get. It works for almost all 4L60, 6570. It doesn't matter. They're virtually all the same. And you will get a lot longer life, even out of your stock 60, if you just keep up with it. That was the biggest problem I had lately. All right, so we covered that. Now going into the build. Part of our system here is I'm going to show you what it takes to build our unit. I'm doing this for Kendrick, but no, if you don't take certain things into account, this is not going to hold 900 horsepower guaranteed. You know what I mean? You have to do hydraulics. That's the biggest part of it. Pressures, surface areas, volume. It's all a part of it. There's things you got to take. There's no one way to just do this. There's no kit you can buy, no matter what anybody says, that it's going to hold this. That's not true. It's all about getting in there and doing those little nuanced things to make it hold your power. So with those things out of the way, we have our wiring harness in. Now we're going to do rear ring gear. And our bearing, A bearing. Okay, I don't know if everybody can see in that little corner there, but I finally got that camera fixed, and you know, we're setting things in, we're spinning things. That was the rear ring gear. The next thing in our level 3, and I'm going to talk about this a second, is our 5-pinion planet. It's a strong planet. Not all 4L65s had them, not all 70s had them. It's just something that GM put in the heavier trucks and Trailblazer SSs and stuff that actually needed it. So what makes this piece special is it's not the material it's made out of, even though that looks really super nice and better than the cast iron 4-pinion. This is actually powdered steel, which is a weaker metal than the 4-pinion. It's cheaply made. That's just GM. Where the strength comes from is how it works. With the 4-pinion, you only got 4 pinions. Now, heli-cut gears, you know, when you're putting power through this thing, everything, the heli-cuts want to shove it back. Everything wants to go back. Keep moving back. That's what gears do. That's what straight drives do. That's anything that has a heli-cut gear. What these do is ease that force going back. You know, when you have the 4-pinion, you only have these 4 pinions. taking that load. Now you have 5. Even though it's a weaker metal, the 5 is stronger because it spreads the load better on the ring gear from those forces trying to go back. And that's what stresses the pinions out, and that's where you'll get the, it's not the material is all I'm trying to say. So that's why these are great. And I really have not seen one break unless it was like a rear end failure that was really bad. But even most rear end failures, they still don't break. So we have this and a bearing. And you know, when you're doing this, even if you're doing a 4-pinion, just spin your pinions, wiggle them back and forth. There should be no play, and it should be like 10 to 20 thousandths on the bushing, something like that. Not too sensitive. Okay, spin it. Next we'll go to our low reverse clutches. Nothing too critical here. We use Borg Warner. It's just reverse. I do believe it's charged in park. But that's about it. And we're using 5 with a wave plate. Now, if you've watched one of my trans brake videos, that's where this immediately changes, and we use a special setup, which you can reference that anytime. That's the 1,000 horsepower Corvette with a brake. Okay, everything's set, and now we throw in our spring clip or case saver, whatever you choose. I'm using a spring clip because another thing to check out that I when we were talking about the case is the actual case lugs. If they're in good condition and they're not beat into, use your spring clip. If they are a little beat into, you can use a case saver, which is just a flat piece of steel that grabs more meat of the case and keeps the low roller right here from digging into it and eventually spinning out. Typically not an issue unless the unit's real old and abused, but that is what'll happen. And then this is your low roller. Really stout piece, doesn't really break unless you blow up your 10 bolt or any other rear end. And also in our level 3, we put in here the Sonax billet race, which comes with the smart shell kit if you've ever bought one. And you know, you just want to check your action. It should free spin and lock. So that just sets in here a certain way, and stay clear of your little spring clip. You might have to move your rear planet around a little bit so it can get in there. And you should be able to push it down. It's okay to tap it down, but don't, you know, sledgehammer it in. Just give it a couple taps if you can't push it in with your hand. Your snap ring that secures it all. And that should not touch the spring clip, but be very close to it. Okay, like so. Okay, next thing, one of our bigger strength mods here is the sun gear. And this is your technical center support for the 4L60. It comes with a stock, it's like a 1/4 inch bushing that rides on the reaction tube surface. Well, we have a wide bushing, double bushing, increase the area of that, because what that's doing is that's keeping a lot of the weight of a non-supported train centered. So more surface, the more strength it's going to have while, you know, those components are resting on it and riding it. So that just goes in there like so. Another thing you want to check if you've done bushings too is, you know, put the components together before you actually install them, because you can see here, like, that's a great bushing job. You know, if it's a little tight, it's probably not going to run as smooth or as well, and it could potentially cause a failure if it's, you know, if the bushing rips out or, you know, something like that. Okay, next piece we got, Sonax Smart Shell. Great piece. In my opinion, not really any stronger than the Beast. The Beast is pretty strong. I rarely ever see him break. And that's happened maybe twice in the time I've been doing this, and those are freak things. But this is a great shell. It is more balanced than the Beast, so for higher RPM applications, this is the shell for you. It is an add-on also on our website. You can find it after you've bought your transmission. It'll ask you, anything else you want to add. But for the higher RPM applications, it keeps any vibration that could occur way down just because it is balanced. It does have a thicker welded race, which makes it probably a little bit stronger in the Beast. But like I said, the Beast doesn't really break around there anyway. So we can add this shell to any level, but it comes customary in the level 3, mandatory. And like I said, it's a great piece. One thing I want to talk about, touching things on this, is the difference on RPMs between the 60 and the 80. I did a post just maybe a week ago. I was messing around and I had a 60 built without the case and an 80 built without the case. And I was kind of showing you guys the difference in the material of the parts and the weight of the parts, and just how you could see how it kind of all works together. Well, this is what makes the 60 great. These light parts, they can take the higher RPMs, whereas the 80 parts, it's a little too heavy and they can't. The iron drum could fly apart, and then you have this centrifugal force, which is constantly making it want to do this despite being centered and everything else. So the 60, with these lighter parts, it's a lot easier on the bushings that keep everything centered. With the 80, the heavier parts, you can hold a shitload of power, you can pull a ton of weight, but when you start getting up in those higher RPMs, the heavier parts start wallowing out the bushings. And the one thing with the 80 that's more important than anything else is the bushings. They actually do seal. It isn't just, lube. They do seal certain drums off, and it needs to be that way. If you start turning higher RPMs, the bushings can't take it. It starts wallowing it out, and then things leak. Teflon rings start wearing into the iron or steel components, and then it fails. You'll see that often with the forward drum. So that's why I like pushing the 60. That 60's junk, that's a thing of the past. The 80 is a wonderful transmission, but this thing is more meant for racing because of just simply how it's made and the type of components and metals that's used. So we have our special Sonax washer here, and it goes on one way. They'll tell you how in the directions. And that just sits on your sun gear there. Now we have our reaction tube. Nothing too crazy about this other than the bushings. Billet ones, not necessary. Choline. I've seen all kinds of remakes with this, and to be honest, I've never had. They don't really fail, so there's no point in sinking money into an expensive one. If you do your sun gear right and your clearance, your end play, tough piece, stout piece. And again, spin the individual components. Make sure your low roller's locking where it plugs into. Sun shell should spin either way. Now we have our front 5-pinion planet, which, much like the rear, same description. Everything wants the thrust. This spreads the load better on that ring gear, and therefore it is more durable. A little assembly goo, our bearing. Plug that right on top there. And now a quick little tip, bungee strap, real handy for plugging in your shaft. Here's our 2-wheel drive shaft for Kendrick's Impala. Nice and shiny. And I may need to tap this in, I may not. Yeah, yep, do. Okay, some shafts, they slide right up. Other shafts, you need a little coaxing. There we go. Sometimes you're, sending the shaft through your front planet, 5 or 4 will rise up. If that happens and you can't quite get it, just try grabbing the planet, turning it, keep jiggling your shaft. It'll sink. It always does. Say some slide right in, some just won't. And then our clip for our shaft, which you'll need a pair of snap ring pliers just for that. And all the bungee strap does is keep the shaft held in while I'm using both hands to secure the clip. Now we grab everything and give it a spin, make sure it locks and spins nice and freely. All right, next thing is the input drum. Now that we have our bottom end put together as we should. This is the 60s input drum. It's aluminum, steel shaft, and this is the LS. He has an LS swap in his. A couple big things on the drum, if you are building your own, is to, this is pretty complex piece, and it pretty much is the 4L60. Nearly all the clutches are in it, all your gears, etc., and it takes the brunt of the forces. This is your input shaft. The level 3 gets a sleeve. That helps keep the aluminum tight against that steel spline, and it prevents it from stripping out. If you do your shifts appropriately and don't go Transgo HD2 and just set it up to bang all hell broke loose, this will last up to a very, very high amount of power. It will take it. A couple things to check is your release check ball. Simply blow some air through it or whatever, drip some fluid, however you choose to check it. There's all kinds of ways. That ties in to what this third accumulator check ball would do. It would vent all the fluid off and you would burn up your 3-4. So definitely one of the things to check out. The other thing, you could blow through the holes, just your lockup hole, your overrun forward, 3-4. Just give them a blow through just to make sure there's nothing in there. Check your lugs. Otherwise, I have the sleeve pressed on, Loctited, so we're ready to go. Lube seal sits right in top. And then your green O-ring for forward. Okay, this drum is not too hard to put together. You will need a spring compressor to do so. And lube up your green O-ring very good. I know a lot of guys don't have the type of tool I'm about to use to install the pistons, but if you don't have this tool, there's a pretty high danger of clipping that O-ring, and then you'll have a cross leak when you go to air check the drum here. And a little lube on your lube seal. That's where the shaft plugs in. Okay, so along with that billet sleeve there, it also comes, and you will have to use it, billet overrun piston. Okay, just made to fit that the sleeve. Everything else though, in our builds, You can use the aluminum pistons if you want, if you're just building your own and it's stock, but I don't recommend that for performance. I like the molded steel pistons. They hold up to heat and abuse better than the aluminum ones with the lip seals on, much better. You don't need tight blue or any fancy, but these will work. The OEM ones they're great. One thing you want to check too, I keep talking about 3/4, which is the most sensitive pack. I explained how if your filters clog, it will burn it up. I've explained how if any of these check balls leak, it will burn it up. The other thing to check is before you go installing your pistons, take your 3/4 piston and put it right there. Check the fit. Check the fit. Nice and tight. That's another place it can leak. And when I was saying about the filter clogging, you're sucking fluid from that hole, and you have to have enough fluid to power the entire servo bore per piston that you're using, whether it be second or fourth. You have to have enough fluid to lube the band. You have to have enough fluid to lube the 3/4 clutch pack and apply pressure to that. You have to have enough fluid to go through all these channels and in the pump. Third and fourth about suck the pan dry, and that's why everybody has such a problem with this thing, and it's purely because the filter's probably clogged. Anyway, I'm probably going to ride that subject the rest of the video. Okay, I have it's easier to install all these pistons this way. You have your forward set, your return spring, your 3/4 apply crown, and your 3/4 piston itself. This is that little tool I was talking about. It helps center all the pistons to go down and really help prevent that green O-ring from being clipped. And if you do it, don't feel bad about it. Like, I've done it a couple times. It even gets the best of us. So you want to make sure all your seals are lubed. If you're new at this and you put a little bit too much goo on it, don't be afraid of it. It's fine. It's just going to dissolve in your fluid when it heats up the first time anyway. Too much goo is not really going to hurt it. Okay, what I like to do is I line up your fat tabs on your forward piston with the 3/4 apply crown tabs, and then you have your little guys here that should be in between such, and you'll see how that fits. Okay. Slow, easy, and if you've lubed everything up and kept it centered, whether you have the help of the tool or not, you guys heard that little thunk, and you seen I didn't even put any force on it. It should just sink. And there should be this little amount of spring back. If you're using an old 700 spring cage, which is recommended for the smart drum, it'll have slightly more, but the stock spring cage will just have a little bit. The next thing we install is the billet overrun piston. This isn't too bad. No real special tools required. The forward piston, it has a nice enough bevel to where you shouldn't even need a lip seal installer or anything like that, but it is a good idea to have those on hand in case you are having a little trouble. But usually a simple little bit of lube and a twist and push, that will seat it just fine. Nice thorough coating, set it in there. Clean dry hands are always easier to work with. And just like that, give it a rock, give it a twist. That, if your bevel is lubed up, that bevel is usually more than enough to just ease it right in. And then we have our spring cage, which it is a little tighter fit on that overrun piston, but just get it on there. Everything will be hunky-dory. Then we have our clip, which I'm going to use a spring compressor to install. And that took me a little while. Our spring compressor is a little bent from the one trans brake we did a long time ago, but you just want to get that clip in. It is a little bit of a challenge, especially without a spring compressor. And you'll want the opening. The spring cage has 4 little tabs on it. You want the opening between 2 of the tabs, and those little tabs just help it keep the clip from blowing out. Otherwise, once it's in, and it isn't going to come out. I've never really seen it. It's just something to, that's why GM put them there, and it's okay to follow their instructions on that. We have your sprag bearing. I like to just put that in on top of the lube seal so don't forget it. That'll make one hell of a noise if you don't put that in and fire this thing up. Okay, before we get into clutches, I want to talk about the forward sprag here. Stout piece takes a lot of the brunt of the initial takeoff. We at Performabuilt, our sprag design setup, very unique. We do a lot of modifications to help it out, which I'm not going to talk about, but if you do buy one of ours, we're one of the only companies that actually does hydraulics to back this thing up. So one of the things that's unique to us that we're very proud of. Okay, first thing on the, inspect your surfaces. This is a bearing race technically, and you want to make sure everything's smooth, not worn out. No burrs, no gouges, and a little lube. And a little lube. Lube is good. Okay, the dual cage, which comes in pretty much all of our builds here. The 60s dual cage is metal, Borg Warner. If you get this brand, this is the best one we've ever found. It holds 99% of the applications, and with the support that we do here, it's even stronger than anybody else's. So I'm pretty proud to say that. Now, the dual cage is a little easier to install than a single cage or anything else. I don't know why you would want to use a single cage other than just a stock rebuild, but it's okay if it's just your daily driver. GM use them, it'll do fine if you're not beating on it. Otherwise, it's not going to hold. This is cheap enough. You should throw one in anyway. To install these, this has a ridge, these dual cages, and the ridge goes on the outside of your race. And I just take my hand, I hold it still, and I take this, twist it in, nice and easy. Install our top, our hub, and our clip. And then you want to test it. We have a freewheeling counterclockwise, if I hold it like this, and locking clockwise. That's how it ought to be. We'll set that aside. Now we get into some clutches. Start building the base of our drum here. Okay, I have our clutches and steels that we'll be using, and another topic I want to cover, because I get this question probably at least once a day, and I don't mind answering it, but I get it so much that I have it copy pasted, and I just copy paste the same thing. Everybody's going to ask me, why don't I soak the clutches? Why don't we soak the clutches? Why? Well, a lot of stuff in the transmission world in the past has had an air of confusion, and somebody did it one way, and now everybody thinks it's got to be done that way. Well, the reason why we don't soak our clutches like in 1955 is because they didn't have dynos back then. Okay, we have a dynamometer, and when you don't soak the clutches, if we were installing directly in a vehicle, don't get me wrong, yes, I would soak them. A vehicle's engine on startup, it's a little bit harsher on the initial startup than a dyno would be. And then chances are, you run it and everything. No damage probably would occur if you don't soak them in a vehicle, but it's a good idea too. Now, in our case, we have a dyno. So I have complete control over everything. I can bring on whatever load I want. I can do this. I can do slow, fast, low pressure, high pressure. It doesn't matter, okay? That being said, because I have control of all those things, we have no load when we start it up. That means these aren't doing anything. They're just free spinning in there, and clearance is space in between. So I don't soak them because there's no load. There's space in between, and the oil goes through the converter and the pump as soon as you hit that button, faster than a blink of an eye. So by the time I actually turn my head and get around to controlling the thing, it's already good and soaked. You know, these are saturated completely, and we're in to run it and ease it up through the pressures and everything else. The other thing, the reason why I don't soak them is because when you're doing clutch clearances, cold oil creates imaginary drag. It doesn't really exist, and it throws you off, making your 20 thousandths clearance thinking it's not quite 20 thousandths, and then you end up adjusting it and it's probably 30 to 40, which is a little too much for me. Oil, when it's cold, doesn't really drag. When it gets hot, it gets so thin that any oil in the clearance space provided, it's kind of irrelevant to where it doesn't actually fill space. It creates a film like it would on your bushings that those metal components run in, same as the clutches. So I don't soak them because, one, we have a dyno and it's a lot easier on this thing than you might think, and two, it does affect clutch clearances. That's why I don't do it. So I hope that makes sense to you all and answers your question. Okay, first thing we're going to be doing is our overrun section, and we start with the steel, and then a Borg-Warner overrun clutch, and a steel, and a Borg-Warner overrun clutch, and the backing plate. Excuse me, I got a little indigestion from my breakfast. And then we do our wave plate and a forward steel. Then we stop. Now it's time for the dual cage sprag, forward sprag we've assembled. The reason being, if you've ever assembled a transmission before, it's a lot easier to, some components need shaken in when clutches are pre-installed. It's a lot easier to install this shooken in on 2 clutches rather than 7. Okay, you're just going to drive yourself nuts trying to get that thing down. So we just set it on top. You'll hear a little metal to metal thunk, and you'll make contact with your bearing. You can spin it. We've sunk both clutches. Forward, Alamatic carbons, great clutches. Hardly ever see any wear and tear. They're just simply wonderful. We use 5. Okay, and then our ply plate, or backing plate, however you want to say it, and our snap ring that secures it all. And you don't want any of your snap rings just kind of hanging haphazardly off of a particular lug. You want them supported by the whole lug. If you have them hanging halfway off, that force of that push and that pressure, it could just pop one of those off, and when one goes, it's going to be a domino effect. It's just going to be plink, 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 plink all the way around, and it's going to make a loud bang like 12 gauge. Okay, next thing is our 3/4 pack, and our 3/4 is so stout. We use 8. In the level 3, we use 8 carbon Borg-Warner frictions, great friction. We've adjusted our clearance before the video to 20 thousandths, and you see the amount of clutches that back to going. I told you guys I was going to ride this filter thing the whole video. Going back to that, you have 8 frictions. You have the band for 4th plus these. You have the surfaces that need lubed. You have the space in the piston that needs, you have the servo bore that needs fluid, you have the fourth accumulator that needs fluid. You have so much fluid going everywhere. You need your pan full, and you need a good filter in it. That's what I'm trying to hit, giving the best examples I can to show you it's not just a one-way street here. You get up in 3.4, and this is where everybody's got their problem. Mostly because the transmission isn't serviced and it demands so much fluid. It's unreal. So, layering these in, start with our ply plate, and then we just bang it out, clutch steel, like a sandwich, like anything else. And I've worked, a while, like I usually do, and we got about 20 thousandths here. Needless to say, in a perfect world, you won't get 20 all the time unless you have the equipment and everything to do it. If you're just doing this yourself, 30 to 40 is perfectly fine. That's way better than GM's factory clearance, which I think was like 100 or close to it. That's more than enough, and it's way better for a daily driver. On performance, do your damnedest. You know, spend some time on it, you know. Don't get frustrated. You can get there. I believe in you. One of the best ways to tell is don't put your load springs in yet. Just, you know, stack it, set your plate on, and if you've got 20, it should be right at the lugs or just a hair above. The truest way to tell is to use these bad boys. And yes, we use them. I know a lot of builders, a lot of trolls, they whine about it, and they're like, they're the 3.4 killers. No, they're not. No, they're not. They help prevent centrifuge in the 3.4 pack when you're turning higher RPMs and you're in another gear, because this input drum is turning all the time. It's plugged directly into the converter. Okay, so we have this nice little bump, free spinning clutch, and you just want to take it around, smack those load release springs back against the wall. A little screwdriver or a pick, because they can kill your 3.4, don't get me wrong, but only if you leave them against the clutch and not against the wall, because that centrifugal force is always going to keep them slung out away from the clutches, and the clutches, they can't go anywhere but around the ring gear, so they're not going to make contact with it. So we got a nice thump, nice free spinning clutch, about 20 thousandths, gorgeous. I like a little oil. I just like using my old school oiler here. I've already done it, but now would be the time to, you know, air check your work. And you can do that by simply blowing in these holes with your gun. A rubber tip helps. You got your overrun, forward, and 3.4. That's really all you need to be concerned with. And while you're blowing in like the 3.4, you know, make sure your orifice here is venting a little air or fluid, and then make sure your 3.4, third release check ball is not leaking anything or any air. And sealing great, because that's what it needs to do. Make sure it releases too. If it doesn't release, you have another problem. You know, the 3.4 is going to be applied all the time, and it's going to be fighting other stuff. It's going to be a mess. Special tool, ring sizer. I've seen guys do it a million ways. I've seen beer cans, hose clamps, zip ties. A little dangerous to me. I would just buy the right thing, because these are kind of like what kills the 4L80. It's not the steel, it's not this, it's not the power, it's these. These are Teflon, but the stuff in here is spinning so fast that these are very capable, and have done it so many times, eating into the metal parts. So in this case, if you used a beer can and you didn't do it quite right and you pinched it, then that little pinch spot, you know, it may be good to the eye, but on a smaller scale, it's going to eat into your pump stator over and over, and it's just going to wallow that thing out, and then you're going to have a cross leak and you're going to burn up a clutch pack. It's just how it is. These, take your time on. I like to do them all at once, but you don't want to stretch them out too much, and you certainly don't want to force them on and twist them. It's always good to buy extra in case you mess up. But you just, little finger dexterity, this takes practice. You just, you know, work them down on there. And you take less and less time on the actual sizer as you go up. Now you don't have to do all of these at once. You can do them one at a time, which is really what I recommend. I'm just used to it. And then you take your actual sizer, and with light pressure, while your other finger's helping center your rings so you don't clip any, just keep easing it down. And there you go. 4 sized rings. Now these aren't completely sized yet. Don't get me wrong, they take a second. So now is a good time. I have a 70 washer for end play. Just take a guess. I do put the bearing on, not like the factory says, but there's a reason for that. It is a little better, it tightens up end play. The pump doesn't actually touch that thing, so it's, or I'm sorry, the reverse drum doesn't actually touch that thing, the pump does. You can do it however way you want. Either way, it is so inconsequential, it doesn't matter. That's the way I do it. If you want to get nitpicky, fine. You can yell at me later in the comments. So, while we're letting those size up, and give it like 10 minutes, it takes some time. Now is a great time to start working on this, which we need the reverse input drum done to install on this before we go installing it into the case. We use a OEM reverse input drum, no need to use anything else. I don't think there is anything else. 4 Borg Warner reverse clutches, 2 lip seals, snap ring, cage, steels, concave wave plate there. The most important thing about this drum purely is the fact that this surface is nice, straight, and clean. Okay, especially if you're using a wide band. If you're using an OEM band, it doesn't need to be straight. The OEM band's only going to utilize the middle of it, and it has flexibility, and it can adapt to that. The wide red band and Raybesto Super Pro, which is what I like to use, they utilize the entire surface of this drum. And if you have even the slightest bow in the middle, especially with the carbon Kevlar that we use, even if it looks like it's making contact to your eye, it's not going to make contact. And to answer Adolfo's question, we don't use a shift kit. We don't use anybody's. We make our own. And our parts just aren't for sale. Our shift kit's not for sale because the reason, it just can't be, even if I wanted to sell it to you, because every single build, I get a piece of paper and it has a whole bunch of facts about your car on it. And I build the shift kit how I want to. So our shift kits are purely up here between the builders that work here. So every single one is literally going to be different. If you want to use a shift kit, the brand doesn't really matter, but what I recommend to you is don't set it up hard, the max setting. Don't do that. That's bad. That's what breaks stuff. Everybody thinks the hardest shift possible is performance. It's not. It's firm shifts are performance. Holding the power is performance, not breaking the tires loose every time you go 1, 2, 3, 4. That's not performance. So if you are using your own shift kit and doing this yourself, just dial it back. Maybe use the middle recommendation or the lighter recommendation. That's what you should do. Otherwise, Performabuilt, me, can't sell you a shift kit, can't even tell you what to do, just because it's all going to depend. and that's where the beauty of our company comes in. It literally is custom. I don't know, I lost myself there because I've seen a question, but anyway, this surface, if you're using a wideband, gotta be flat. So that way it can utilize the whole band, because if you don't have the middle, you're actually taking away from the full benefit. If the middle of this band isn't being used, you basically have an OEM band. Okay, you did nothing. So that's why that matters. Okay, going on to build this thing. This thing can be a little tricky for some. The best tip I could give you is do a shot, have some patience, and you'll need a special, I have one that looks like this. This is a lip seal installer tool. I have one that looks like this. This is another lip seal installer tool. Either or will work. This one a little bit more dangerous just because it's metal and sharp. If you're not experienced, don't use it. Or you cut apart a trapper keeper. I've seen guys do that. So work your lip seals in. If you're doing anything with lip seals, you know the lip seal needs to be down in the direction of the fluid so it can flare out and, you know, seal it. It can't just be the other way, because it'll open up the wrong way and fluid will just blow by it. So we want our lip seals facing down, because fluid's going to be not really going up, but it's going to be going through here into here and going like that and applying this piston. So this is OEM. This isn't anything aftermarket. And assembly goo around the center and the outside. This is a part that's kind of fun. Like if you're doing this at home, you know, this is one of them things that you can just constantly be getting better and better at. And eventually, you know, you may struggle for 30 minutes at first, but if you do just a few of them, you'll sink them in just a few seconds to a minute, and then you'll just make people wonder how you did that. Okay, so the first thing on this drum, I'm going to use this guy because this is the one that most people probably have access to. I know it used to come in kits, but you'll go around the center until you feel the first seal drop. I got one of my hairs in there. And then you'll go around the outside while giving it I don't know, a firm, not firm, but a little bit of pressure in the center. And what you're looking for really is that tight spot. Once you feel the tight spot with your little tool, you'll go back around, keep giving it that firm push, and you should feel it sink. Mine sunk a long time ago. It only takes a couple seconds. This is the one thing where you can't, these pistons, you kind of got to give that firm push. There is no firm push. It's either going to go or it's not, and you can't force it. And there's not really enough bevel to really help you out anyway. Okay, the next step, you can go about it one or two ways. You can install the clutches and steels, or you can do the spring cage. It doesn't matter which one comes first. I'm going to do the cage just because I don't like using tools that aren't at my desk. It's annoying to me. Okay, clips in, and again, this spring cage is a little bit bigger, a little bit different looking, but it has the same principle as that one. It's got four little tangs here that help hold the clip in, so you want that center right in the middle there. Now we move on. This concave wave plate here, I'm going to do it different than OEM. I'm putting it in this way. and that isn't the stock way, but it is so inconsequential, it does not matter if you're going to yell at me for it. The reason I like to do it this way is just because of something I think makes sense. This way is OEM, and you have the center surface is what's pushing up, not the outside. Another thing is this way it can slip in, if it ever does break, which is rare, it can slip in here and the pieces can hinder it, I guess, or bind it up. With this way, it uses a little bit more of the surface area of the actual steel, and it can actually get in there. It'll just kind of stay in pieces. But that is so, I've never actually seen that. It's just a thing I read in some of the update pages in the kits. Then we have a steel clutch. Steel clutch. Ending with a clutch, and then our big ply plate and our snap ring. Okay. And you just want to make sure you have free spinning clutches. You should have, you know, a little space. The clearance does not matter in this drum. It's going to vary. Some drums have more than others. All you need to be concerned with with this drum is the clutches just need to spin freely, because this drum's actually spinning faster than anything else in this unit, no matter what. So once that's all said and done, we take our reverse input drum and we shake it till it drops. Put our sizer back on. Just keep it on there until you're ready to do the pump or whatever. And we take our drum and put it in our case. I have, you can use vice grips or whatever you want. I have something we made out of a old converter hub and a piece of rebar. And you'll just kind of twist and shake. You shouldn't have too rough of a time getting it in there, but you'll hear a metal on metal, it'll drop. You can see the reverse input drum's a little below the pump surface here, and that's where we ought to be. All said and done, next thing is our Robusto Super Pro band that comes in our level 3 all day, all the time. And I already talked about the reverse drum surface and the things the band needs to, you know, do its job efficiently. Okay, next we line up our, I think they call it the volcano on the band, and then our anchor pin hole. And simply check to see if any of the band parts are hitting the case or anything. Excuse me. Ooh. All right, now move on to the servo, but first lube up your servo bore. You may end up doing this a couple times, like I probably will in the video, setting the band clearance, which is, you know, just as important as the 3/4. You don't want it near as tight as the 3/4 because it cannot overlap, and there is a little overlap to delay. With our modifications, we have gotten rid of that, but on a stock 60, you will feel an overlap on the downshift. Okay, so I have our pin installed with spring clip washer. What I think it ought to be, I shaved it off, you know, pretty close. I'm just simply taking a guess, just because you need to kind of assemble it to even get a proper band clearance. But this is Sonax Super Hold second gear servo and fourth, and you guys all know that. So that's what we use in level 1, 2, or I'm sorry, level 2, 3, and black edition. And we just install our center O-rings here. Just work them in. Outside O-rings are D-rings. One of the things that you always want to be careful with, no matter what tranny or what you're installing, D-rings, they cannot be twisted. The flat must be down, and the rounded D part will be what actually makes contact. So I like to clamp the O-ring down with my thumb and kind of just run my other hand and pull on it, you know, and let it go once I know it's flat and flush. Okay, a little goo in the middle. I like to put a little assembly lube on the servo pin itself just to protect it from sliding in and out of that bore, whether you be air checking or the initial startup or what have you. And our return spring. Okay, one thing you want to do is you must use this gold washer with this servo. And to make it easier, remove this O-ring when you're checking your clearance. If you put this in the bore, it's not going to want to come out. You're going to ruin an O-ring, and if you aren't a shop like me, you probably won't have another one. And even if you are a shop, that's a waste of money. So remove it. Wood clamp from Home Depot, handiest tool ever. It lets you use both hands and however you want to do it. We have our snap ring here. And the OEM band, or not the OEM bands, these Raybesto Super Pro bands, I'd say space is about a clip length. You don't want it to drag too much or really be that close, because the carbon has a lot more grip than the red bands or any other band does, and there's that overlap. You don't want that. So really, if you just grab the band back here and you can move it up and down like this and spin the entire assembly without touching the reverse drum, like if you just move the input shaft and it turns, you're probably perfect in every way. And I think I nailed it, you know. I definitely did. If you watch the pin and everything, there's about a clip length. I can free spin everything. Nothing's really dragging or binding up. And we can check this further simply by just putting the pump backing in. It doesn't have to be bolted down or anything, but it helps center it. So you want to check your release hole, fourth gear. It springs back really quick. It's about the same clearance. Fourth has a little bit more than second will. And then second. Gorgeous. So now, just to make sure, put a little lube on the rings and center shaft there, and in this pump stator. This is just our pump back. It just helps you see. And I like to just, you know, poke the band. You can move it up and down and it spins pretty freely, you know, the same way you would nice band clearance. So this is just, you know, set your pump backing on it, and you can better see when it's actually centered. But if you've got it, it usually isn't that far out of whack, and you can see what you got. So now we just remove the fourth servo and our clip and install our O-ring, and then we're moving on to the pump. back where it was. Nice and tight. Alright, just wipe my excess grease from my hands off there, and we have our fully installed servo, second servo, pin, band, reverse drum, input drum, 3/4 overrun, and forward sprag clutches. So, moving on. Probably the most important thing in this transmission is the pump. So, I've said it before, the pump's like your heart, pumps all the blood, fluid, it's even the same color. So, our pump is unique to our build, it is heavily modded. Just slapping another pump in will not work, but if you are doing your own or repairing yours or just checking things out, there are certain things to look for. One of the things we address here at Performabuilt is we look at the TCC valve, the pressure regulator valve, and the boost valve, and we check for wear marks. You can usually see a shiny spot like on the boost valve or the valve inside the casing that's rubbed raw and lets fluid pass by. You can test this valve. You know, it's important that this pump be flawless, because it really is, you know, without good pressure, what you've done is virtually useless. It just won't work without it. Now this delivers, this pumps. Okay, this tells it what to do, the valve body. This makes sure it does what it does all the time. So one of the most important things is we jack the pressure up in this pump mechanically. So if you have one of ours, please keep that in mind. We boost it to roughly 220, depending on your application. The daily driver is a little less than 220, or the towers. But if you have jacked your tune-up in your car or truck to make your stock 60 last, which is okay, don't get me wrong, could use a little more pressure. I think they run like 140, 150 stock. If you've jacked that up, please, if you have one of ours, turn it back down to whatever stock was, which is usually 60-65% on your tune to be safe. And you'll just want to check your stock bin file. If you've done any tuning at all, you should save that stock bin file anyway, or you shouldn't be tuning, period. If you have questions or trouble with tuning, please give us a call. We know quite a bit about it, and we'll be more than happy to help you out tuning your car or truck, or just getting it back to stock, or however, you know, whatever we need to do to make this work for you. So we do the valve work, you know, vacuum check, air check, fluid check, you know, make sure your surfaces are perfect in every way, you have new bushing, and otherwise the pump is pretty much just the pump. It has always been a good pump. I like the 4L60 pump more so than any Ford or 4L80 or anything else, because those pumps are gear driven. Okay, this is a 4L80. Not only does it weigh about 45 pounds, there is no room for error in this at all. This is a gear with machine surfaces, and gears have drag from the fluid. And if you do not have this lined up just right, and your spacing is not just right, and I mean perfect, this thing's going to fail and send shrapnel through the entire unit. It will probably still pump, but until it clogs up with metal shrapnel from it grinding itself up, then it will stop. This thing, which I'll show you when assembled, has a lot of flexibility, a lot of room for error, and it pumps. It pumps so much more than this thing, and it has virtually no drag on it, and it's just a far superior pump than this 4L80 pump, just because of what it's made out of. The biggest problem with these things, guys pull the transmission up with the bolts or something stupid like that, and then it breaks it, because this is just, it's not steel like this one. This is just powdered metal. Okay, it's meant to never see load. It does not see load. Pressure, there is a 0.00001% chance pressure could ever break this thing, and it's probably because it's faulty to start with. We use this all the way up well over 1,000 horsepower, the 13 vane stock OEM rotor, and it is fine if the converter clearance is right and everything in the pump's correct. Okay, if you're breaking rotors left and right, your flex plate's wonky, your flywheels, I'm sorry, not your flywheel, your converter's messed up, you have thrust bearing issues, or just you didn't do it right. If you can't get this 13 or 10 vane, 10 vane's really just as good. There's a big argument between the two, but I think they're the same. They pump the same volume and everything. If you're getting these to break, or somebody tells you you need a billet one, no you don't. You have another issue that you need to address, and that's just plain simple fact. If you do break your pump on install, we're not gonna be mad at you. Just tell us, you know, we'll work with you on it, because it's an easy thing to do. Like if you, especially if you've never installed a tranny before, or you're new to you know, whatever. So the first thing we got to do the pump is the bushing, and once we do that, you have the slide. Important piece for this has to move, and there's an O-ring inside here, right in there, that needs replaced, and that is extremely important. Then we have our pin spring, our Teflon and rubber. And the Teflon and rubber is for the slide. It goes in this little notch here. And it's important for the rubber, if you've taken apart your pump and the rubber is flat, the little black rubber, you need to replace it. It needs to be round. It does a job by helping keep all this pressure along with this O-ring and everything. Everything's got to compress and be tight. That slide can't be just flopping around in there. So this helps. So if it's flat, replace it. But you can slide them both down in there like so. And then your pin, which will lock it all into place. The pin gets a wear spot on it because it sits, it's not on the slide side, it's on the casting of the pump side, because not all of it actually touches the casting. So that slide's going to be moving back and forth, you know, through various throttle points, and the pin's not going to be stationary. It's going to jiggle itself around a little bit in there, and it's going to wear on it. So you want to make sure the entirety of your surface of your pin is round and smooth. If it's not, you just need to replace it. You can't half-ass it. It just will not work right. You'll have, like if you do take any shortcuts like that, you will have this slow issue that you may think is something else, or the 4L60 is just junk and let me throw up our hands and just quit. It's probably something stupid like this, and it's not going to be something that's an issue right away, but it will be, you know, within, I don't know, we'll say whatever miles. Next thing I like to do, I like to use these 4L70 concave springs. They're a little bit heavier duty. Scoot the slide back, and then with a screwdriver or a special tool, it doesn't matter, just pry it in there. That also takes a little practice. Okay, then we set our 13 vane rotor in. And a little tip, you know, if you've had, let's say you have a tranny in your car and you broke the pump or something else, and you're wondering what your spacing actually was, how you can tell is, if you can't tell just by putting a drill bit up before you bolt the thing up, you could tell by when you have this apart, you can see the shiny spot where the converter neck has road. That's about how much spacing you got and how much you can have. You know, if you're too deep, you're gonna be grinding in the back of this. If you're too little, your converter's gonna come out of these teeth to try to go back in the wrong way, because this is near impossible to do, and then smash this thing. So it's very important that you have an 1/8 to 3/16 spacing for your converter and flex plate pads, and I have a post on that. I show you drill bit, Allen key, something you can measure with, and you probably won't need shims. I had to use 2 shims, but just use some good washers if you need them. Keep in mind, not every vehicle needs a shim, so I don't want guys to think you just need shims. Shim everything. No, that's not true. Check it with a drill bit between your pads, shove the converter back, and put your drill bit up and shove it forward, and that's how many washers you need. There's a very detailed post on it where it's like that long, and there's pictures and everything. It's on our Facebook. Check it out. I know that wasn't the best explanation, but essentially you have your flex plate and your converter, and you shove the converter back all the way so that the back is what's hitting is the neck on this. That's what's hitting. Then you move it up to where you have an 1/8 to 3/16. However, either one's fine. I prefer an 1/8. So back to this, we have a 13 vane rotor. On the 60, I like to use hardened rings. They don't help the rotor any, but what they do is they help prevent wear on these little guys. So we'll slide our vanes in, and they should just slip right in. And our top hardened ring to help keep it all in place. And now that we're pretty much assembled, I don't know if you guys can see this too much, but the 80, it don't have any play. This 60, look at all this. It's a very flexible, great pump, and it pumps. It'll do up to 400 psi before the relief goes and it vents off all the fluid, which it will probably pump more had this not being there. Okay, so as with any oil pump, with the 80 or the Fords, you need to pack them with grease. With the 4L60, simply a little tranny fluid will do. Not a good idea to pack it with grease. It's just a different type of pump, and it doesn't work that way. Okay, now we're about ready to drop it in, line it up. Just pick a spot. Oh, also make sure you have a new screen in here. This catches converter debris. So, if you may be doing your own and you want to know if your converter failed, if dumping it out and putting a rag under it and seeing a bunch of black pepper flakes doesn't do it for you, if there was anything that failed, it's going to be caught in here. And that's another way we can tell if your converter took a shit or whatever. So I like to pick I use the boost control or boost valve port here just to help me line it up. You can use the lockup vane or, any ones that match. It's only really going to go on one way. I've never tried to put it on another way, but I can't imagine it would line itself up where all the bolts would actually go in. A big part of something else to check that I didn't quite cover is run your finger and shine a light down in your pump stator. It's a machine surface. It can't have any grooves or digs or anything because of those Teflon sealing rings need to ride it. And the stator is still, it just plugs in the converter and it does not spin, it does not move. However, what does spin is your input shaft, and that's constantly moving at a minimum of 750 RPM or whatever, whatever your vehicle's set at. So that needs to be nice and smooth, good for those sealing rings. Now I just like to use a speed handle. What we're doing now is we're getting ready to line the pump up. I know there's a couple specialty tools for this. Give me 1 second while the phone here quits.
Call from Rhineville, Jerry.
Alright, so speed handle, what I like to do is you have it loose, give it a snap. Just 2 bolts will do. Loose, give it a snap. That'll make sure everything's kind of tight but kind of loose. And like I said, I know there's a specialty tool for this, but I've taken apart GM remans where they actually, I know they use that tool, and the pumps just don't come out, like they aren't lined up. I'm doing it a way that is my way, and it works 100% of the time, every time, and you can slip it in and out like butter years after you built it. So trolls, bear with me. One thing I've learned is there is no right or wrong way to really do anything with cars. There is only what works, and that's how we're doing it today. Okay, before we go putting rings and stuff on it, how I do it my way is you remove your sizer, you have your kind of loose, kind of tight halves, take a screwdriver or a dowel pin, line it up in one of the bolt holes here, and with a dead blow, simply give it a couple taps, knock the halves together, jimmy them around a little bit. It should move nice and free like that. Now for the trolls that were whining about my claw foot, no, a metal hammer is not going to hurt it. But you can see, you probably can't see, there is overlapped. The back and front are overlapping. So what you want to do is eliminate that. And how I do it is I just simply give them a couple taps to knock them back and forth. The screwdriver helps keep the backing in a permanent position where the front can kind of slop around a little bit. Once they are knocked clean, you should be able to pull this right out if your hands aren't totally greased up. A little help of a pry bar, but you should have no resistance. It should slide out like butter. And then you go tightening it down. There, very nice. Now, you see here how nice and easy that moves. And if I don't have the greasiest hands, it comes right out. And thank God I didn't mess it up when I whacked my table with it, but you can see if you're still lined up, if you just look right down through your actual bolt holes for the case. And then what you want to do is you just want to keep a firm hand on it and tighten it down. A buddy helps if you don't have a special setup for air. And that's another thing. I'm going to say this one time. High volume shops use guns. We're not your mom and pop shop that needs, torque this, torque that. These do it. There is a whole thing over there that is, I don't even understand how it works, but it's all regulated. And this is for us. So I'm tired of hearing, don't use an air gun. It's not just an air gun. And always tighten in a star pattern. Like I said, that system over there it's set to a certain thing, which virtually all the 60 bolts are the same torque spec. It ain't much. I forget what inch pound or whatever it is, but that's just a high RPM, low torque gun. So now that we're all tightened up, Hi, Mike. Mike's one of our guys. He's running 9 seconds, possibly faster next year in his full weight Camaro, about almost 4,000 pounds, about 3850, I believe. And he's in the 9s with our black edition. So he's pretty fast. Next year, he probably do a little nitrous. And Josh is right. Josh is one of the guys I've worked with his problems. He's just honest. He didn't lie about nothing. Communicates. That's all I want. We'll do our best to work with you on anything. Okay, we have our scarf cut rings here for our reverse drum and our little guide washer. Yeah, and for those, there's another thing. For those that say 4L60 can't be in the 9s, and Mike's right there. He's in the 9s. It ain't even nothing new anymore. There's so many in the 9s, not just ours. There's other companies. Stop saying that. Okay, next thing, I'm running out of goo, but we'll put our gasket and O-ring after we lube up our surface here. This might be all the assembly lube I have left for the video. I don't know if I bought any. Okay, gasket. Little beknownst fact, the 60 is not too crazy on end play. It's not overly sensitive. It does matter, but it's not like the 80 or the 400 or anything. But your gaskets are a factor in end play, and not so much this one, but with another transmission, they're actually quite the big factor. Nice and easy. Little PB blaster. If you're ever disassembling anything, these gaskets tend to stick. This will just help keep them from sticking on the components. It'll make any cleaning or cleanup easier for you. Just a little bit. Now we have our O-ring. Give it a snap. A little grease around it. Okay, just when you flip it over, check your holes again, see if you're still lined up, which we are. And we should be hitting the O-ring, which we are. Now, these are your pump bolts, and they all have little O-rings underneath them. Really important. One thing I'm doing here is I like to put the pump bolts in, because I like to tap the pump down with a rubber mallet. I don't like to use the bolts to do it, and with these O-rings it won't just fall in. You know, good luck. And just hand thread them in. A little, thank you, a little more goo. And it's pretty easy to do. Like, You can drive them in with the bolts, but I don't like that. I know a ton of builders that do that. That to me cocks things. I don't like to be that way where I can't be exact. With this, I know it may not look the best, but if you put pressure on one side with your hand harder than most and you're tapping another and you go back and forth, it will stay even. It can't actually gouge anything, and it will be a nice fluid install like you just saw. Plus, driving it in with the well, I shouldn't use the word driving. Pulling it in with the bolts is never a good thing on anything, and the only other thing is doing it that way, you can't feel if you were actually clipping one of those center rings or not, or something was kind of out of place. With tapping and using your hands, you can feel if there's not something right, and you can feel if there's anything binding or going wrong. Otherwise, it's just right in. And that's mostly what I'm trying to iterate to a lot of guys that say, you know, why don't you get the special tool to do it? Because it's a huge bracket thing. Nobody wants to set that up, and this works. Why does it matter if it works and it's easier at that? I know some guys just have a lot of pride. Okay. And just a click. Alrighty, pumps in. Now we do our front pump seal. And you can do the pump seal before you actually go installing the pump. I think it's easier just to do it after. Our retainer keeps it from blowing out because the aluminum and steel have different expansion rates. That ties into a lot of things, but we'll just leave it there for now. Your lockup O-ring, which is important. You know, if you're putting in your converter for the first time and you've never done it before, be very careful. If you clip that ring, you won't know about it. It's super easy to do, and you will not have lockup. So if you install a tranny, ours be it or whoever's, and you don't have lockup right away, you might mess that up. Something to look at. I know it's a pain to pull out, but it happens. Mistakes are made. Okay, now all I'm doing is checking end play. I like to grab the shaft kind of cockeyed with my little tool and push in and out on it. And it should have very, very little but some. You know, it shouldn't be totally locked down or hard to turn any other way. I don't know if that can't, no, the camera can't really see that. Let's make sure. And we want to be able to, a little bit harder to do than the input shaft, but we want to turn the output shaft both ways. It should feel very free counterclockwise, and clockwise it should move very nice, but it will be a little harder to turn because you have the workings of everything that's going on in here. So now we're moving on. We're almost done here. Something to check that you should do way before you get to this step, but when you've installed your low roller and snap ring, you should give your clutches and steels for your low reverse a little poke. That clearance should be about a steel or about a clutch. Not really that sensitive, but you should have something there. Otherwise, if it's too tight, probably won't be able to turn this, and if it's too loose, that piston can overextend and you'll have a whole mess of issues. Okay, one of the things you'll see me do in this video, like right now, that's the second check ball there. Don't leave that out or you'll have a second shift from hell. Is I've installed this piston in the past, and it's no secret anymore that if you just leave it out and plug the hole, it prevents the leak and it gives the planets lube in all gears and not just fourth. So that's what we're doing today. So if you see me leave it out, I've left it out and plugged it for a reason, because it is better than simply flipping it or leaving it in there. And it is not a secret trick or anything. It's just something that it's like blocking the PWM and making it on or off. Everybody does it. It's nothing new. And the OEM way just doesn't work. It's a fault from the factory. So if you're sitting here and saying I left out a piece, no I didn't. Quite clearly I'm talking about it. That's why. Don't give me shit. Okay, next, this is where the video gets fast and shit. Shift kit I made up for his Impala. It's gonna get it. There is no real way I can tell you how to do this. Like I said, it's just a matter of knowing what holes to drill and how big and his rear and what he's actually doing, the type of driving he's doing. So I've already built his shift kit and everything, and rerouted some of the hydraulics in it to do some special things that we are known for at Performabuilt. And I'm going to begin by securing this with our plate here and 3 small 8mm. Just hand thread everything in for now. And then I've set up his second accumulator housing here. This is also, along with our shift kit, it's going to vary. For the heavier vehicles, I like it a little softer shifting. For a race car, it's got a lot of flexibility. It doesn't, quite matter, but either way, in your shift kit, you don't want to eliminate it. You don't want to block it off. You need the accumulator. Don't get rid of it. That's what breaks stuff. Hard shifts are not performance. If you have a transmission that just breaks tires at part throttle, like not even giving it anything on second, you have an issue. Your transmission shifts too hard and it is going to break something.
Call from James Limke.
And you guys hear the phone and everything.
Call from
This is
James
actually a
Limke.
little bit milder of a day, but
Call from
Christmas
James Limke.
is coming up, and if you guys are in a hurry and you have ordered, I encourage you to get them in, because we just got back from Thanksgiving. I'm pretty stacked, so if you're waiting around and you're in a rush, don't wait. Get in line. Just call and place that order, because it's going to build up and I'm not going to be able to get it to you within just a couple days. It might take a week or more. You never know. But if you want to order, get them in. End of the year is coming. Call today and we'll get you in line and get you done. Because these take a while. It's not just something we keep on the shelves. I need you guys to understand that too. You don't keep transmissions on the shelves. You call, it's not ready, obviously, and we have to build it. That's how it works, When I say custom, I'm not talking out my ass. I mean it. Okay, so these 2 holes here, the top one, this one over here for the pressure manifold switch, these are actually your alignment holes. You don't need any fancy dowels or anything like that. You just need 2 bolts, and once you get these, your second accumulator and your reverse plate here hand threaded in, you can just torque these down. I think it's 8 foot-pounds, I'm not sure. But those are really the only 2. You don't need to shove a bolt in every single hole. Those will be, if you actually sit here and look, you'll see them. It is a lot tighter, and this is an oblong hole. It's shaped differently.
From James. Call from James Limke. Call from
Okay.
James Limke.
Alrighty. Now undo your alignment bolts. Now we only have a couple more bolts, pressure manifold switch, PWM, the 3.2, all that, and our valve body, which really is a lot of the strength in our unit. I've had guys ask, you're not using a stock valve body, are you? And I'm like, well, yeah, that's all they have. And give me 1 second. This is starting to get crazy here. Howdy.
How's it going, man? I'm from Michigan. I'm bringing the trans down.
All right, can you just come in and wait? I'm doing a video and everybody's busy. So it'll only be maybe 15 more minutes. So back to this valve body. A lot of our strength comes from the valve body, not what we do to it, not the type of material it's made out of. And we do everything from rerouting fluid and making it work differently to just overall improving the functionality of it, and that's where I go back to that custom thing. So I've already done it, and unfortunately I can't show you. One, because I don't want to, it is a secret, and two, I don't want to give you the wrong idea that I've built this for an Impala, and if you do exactly what I said, it's actually not going to work in your truck as well as it should, because it's heavier, your rear might be different, and it's set up different. So all I've really going to talk about is we have a aluminum piston in our forward accumulator, brand new solenoids in our 1.2 and 2.3 solenoid, our pressure control solenoid, EPC solenoid, and overall just gone through, clean, flat sanded, and done our mods. This primarily, the transmission, for those of you that don't quite understand how it works, the pump is a pump, and that does one thing, and it's a constant. It pumps pressure. The components provide your surface area. That helps with your strength. This tells it what to do and gives it the volume that it needs to have through certain channels and everything else. So how a transmission works is it's actually kind of stupid. It can't make its own decisions. If your transmission is not shifting right or just something's amiss, it's actually probably not the transmission unless you have a mechanical failure in here, which is rare. Unless you have a stuck valve, this thing is usually going to do what it's going to do, or if you throw a code, then you might have a problem. But honestly, these solenoids and everything else, the solenoids work on or off, and that's how it changes gears. The PCM tells that what to do, but it can't do it by itself. The pressure control solenoid operates on a stepped system. I believe there's 5 steps, and it needs the computer to tell it what to do. Otherwise, it's going to go max line, and it's just going to put all the fluid it can to it. So in essence, if you have a shift issue, first thing you need to do is scan for codes. Otherwise, it's probably mechanical, and we need to dive deeper. But always, when you have a problem, whether it be our unit or someone else's or yours, scan for codes first. That's the first step in everything. And then, we here at Performabuilt, you can call us. We're more than happy to help you. We'll help you through the rest of the process. We know what steps to take, and before we go just yanking out a transmission. So the only thing that I have left to do the valve body, which I'm sorry, I know you guys hate it that I don't talk about it, but hey, that's what makes us special, and that's just why. So I need my new tub of goo here. If you're installing it in the car underneath, probably not necessary to use goo, but I would anyway. Helps keep the balls from falling around. If you're installing like I am, definitely need some goo. Good luck trying to aim that valve body on the Okay, so we have our balls in and everything, and this is one of those things that, when you're installing a valve body, it helps to take this little tensioner off. I'm not going to do that just because I'm used to it, and you don't really need alignment dowels or anything. Just simply, with any transmission, just take your time and be careful what you're doing. You know, it's something that's not going to be so far out of whack. It's almost impossible not to get it lined up. So I like to leave it rest. Your goo's holding your balls in place, and put your linkage shaft in the manual shift lever and just let it rest. And as long as you got it damn close, take a bolt, doesn't matter, and give a straight, firm push down. And if you've just been careful and lined it up right, you should be able to very easily start a bolt into the hole, which will help that tensioner held down like so. And if you just look, you know, it's lined up. But don't forget, you know, it's the same as this. If you actually looked at the valve body holes and looked at some of the alignment holes, this hole here for the pressure manifold switch, one of the bolts, is a lot tighter around the bolt than any of these holes are, and that's for an alignment. So I don't think you can see that, but we have all the slop, we have no slop. Same up there. So now we just finish installing our valve body here. And what we have is a whole bunch of 10mm bolts and 8mm bolts, and that's about the only size that you need next to the 13mm that is the pump bolts. So all I do is set these in here and hand thread them all. You know, you don't want to just go attacking it with a ratchet or anything. And you have two small 10mm over here. They're shorter than the rest. Our pressure manifold switch that you will install next, with our three very long 10mm. And if you're one of them guys that just has no 10mm or constantly is losing that damn socket, this is not the transmission for you. It's a 10mm nightmare. Alright, these three are the longer 8mm, and they go in these spots. Anywhere else, it's going to cause a lockdown on the sun shell, and you will have no second, fourth, and reverse. Or you could shear the bolt off and get not so lucky and cause damage, or have a horrible noise and it might still work, but odds are you're going to lock it down. It's really amazing what a bolt can hold on to. Two short 8mm, and I have a couple extra odds and ends my guys left in the pan here, but nothing that belongs. So all you should have left at this point is one clip, your solenoid here, and your two very short 10mm for the TCC solenoid. So I like to start with the original alignment bolt and tighten that up. And then just move on in kind of a crisscrossy pattern. Okay, good as gold. All right, very lastly, we plug in our harness to our EPC, our pressure control solenoid. Our 1, 2, 2, 3. If you ever want to mess with your buddies, drop their pan, switch them two around. You'll have all kinds of goofy stuff you're making their vehicle do. Not telling you guys to do that, but if you want to be funny. Okay, plug our TCC in with its 2 bolts. Oh. I lost one. And secure that down. And lastly, a little assembly goo. And just tuck that in. These new harnesses, they can be a little stiff, but they'll conform eventually after it heats up. Alright guys, so there's the valve body, everything's done. Slap a pan on this just as a mock-up here, and we'll be good to go. So going back, this is the type of filter I use for the dyno. It's just a shallow OEM filter, but I'm quite literally, this is how y'all install a filter, just to show you. Installed. Nice and tight. And we have a gasket. We like to use the Farpack fiber gaskets. They have like tar on them that kind of adheres after they heat up at first. A really great gasket. Don't like cork. And this is just my dyno test pan. We just give out black pans. They're very nice. And we're just gonna put 4 bolts in it for show, so it looks I don't feel like doing 16 bolts just to show you guys what a transmission looks like, so we'll just do it this way. I got one more step here. Where's my good marker? It is for you, Kendrick. Here we go. There we go. There's my signature on that. And there we have it, guys. Yeah. Alright, get this hook off here, and we'll give you guys a spin around and send you on your way the rest of the day. Alright, there's my signature. This is Kendrick, 650 wheel horsepower handling, level 3 4L60 servo. Beautiful, gorgeous.